Eckstein case is, oh my gosh, it's 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, and that's why you're here for cannabis legalization news. Hi, I'm Tom.
Hey, it's Miguel.
And what happened in your neck of the woods this week? Because I found out something about hemp in Indiana that I think is just stupid.
Well, Seattle Hemp Fest is still fighting for the rights to live. The most recent debacle for them is Expedia, the Expedia Travel. They recently bought a building at the one end of this 1.5 mile stretch that Seattle Hemp Fest occurs on in the park. And now they're denying Seattle Hemp Fest access to the parking lot where they, for the past 27 years, have unloaded and loaded guests into this park. Seattle Hemp Fest tries really hard to keep a flow of traffic and be a good citizen. And so the fact that Expedia is pretty much giving them a hard time, it's pretty messed up.
Well, isn't Expedia like they do bookings and stuff, right? They're a travel destination website where you book a vacation, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's what it is. It's just a .com, a website that happened, but
so like is HempFest isn't the draw that it used to be, so people just aren't booking their travel through Expedia to go to HempFest enough, or is Expedia, which is weird. You're in Seattle, Washington. Why wouldn't you be anti-hemp?
Well, isn't that the irony though too? I mean, Seattle Hemp Fest brings in about 200,000 people a year. People, not dollars. 200,000 people in 3 days. And you think probably a good 100, 200 are using Expedia. I would imagine so. I mean, there's a bitter irony here right now.
Yeah, a travel company is shutting down a destination event. That sounds like the other bitter irony that came out of Indiana, and it's a new law. So let me just share my screen here. And this Indiana companies challenge state's ban on smokable hemp. So Indiana has basically the worst industrial hemp law in the country, which is really, really silly because it literally legalizes industrial hemp, but prohibits the smokable hemp flower. And so you know how laws go into effect usually at the first of the year or like halfway through the year on July 1st. And so on July 1st, they had this new change to their industrial hemp law in Indiana where they banned smokable flower, and smokable flower is some of the highest quality stuff in the CBD hemp world right now. I mean, you can have your extracts and your tinctures and your isolates and your rubs and all that stuff, but it's the hemp flower that you can sell like wholesale for $350 a pound, or maybe even more depending on if you're a really, really high quality grower. And that they would make it a crime to have hemp flower and then still say they have industrial hemp is ridiculous. And it's not only ridiculous, according to this lawsuit, they say that it's unconstitutional. Well, the Indiana the law would be unconstitutional at that level because of the supremacy clause. You can't say that it's a federally legal substance and then completely criminalize it, but we will see what happens.
That's kind of
okay. What's that?
I would say it's kind of bitter irony how Indiana is kind of regressing their laws, whereas Arizona, of all places, has just approved that police officers can consume CBD.
Oh my gosh, that is the other thing. That's one of the things that I. Oh crap, my computer's a little buggy, which isn't all that great. So how come they weren't able to consume CBD earlier? I mean, it's Arizona. CBD's been lawful for 6 months.
Well, I think just the fact that the 0.03 THC proved, or anytime you mention the word THC, you're going to have questions. I told my son, who's about to travel to college, he grew up in this liberal paradise, I guess, of Seattle, where cannabis is everywhere pretty much. But I was like, rule of thumb, when you leave the state, everything's illegal. Like residents,
legal. Out of Seattle, everybody's nuts. They criminalize everything. For example, let's talk about how they criminalize certain aspects of this. And then, so you said that you grew up in Seattle, and if that's true, how come in Illinois, and the reason why this is in a separate browser is because if you want to get around those counters, you go to an incognito window and then you can read the news for free. So Illinois is wondering whether to limit the potency of their pot because of the increased scrutiny after its links to psychosis. So I'm assuming, and I could be wrong on this, but I'm assuming that your kid is totally nuts, and that's
Oh yeah,
just because he had that access to this high quality marijuana as he was growing up.
yeah. It's not the hormones or the fact that being a teenager sucks, anyways. It's got to be the access to the cannabis that's been around him since he's a baby.
It's exactly how Hitler got started.
Hey, so what's going on in Congress? What are the scheduling hearing?
Oh my gosh, yes, that is another one of the few things that you guys need to hang out for a few more minutes. First, we're also going to have Abbey Moffitt, a Colorado attorney, coming on, cannabis attorney, to discuss where their state is. But right now, or earlier today, probably, on Capitol Hill, Congress people had a hearing about the descheduling of THC, or marijuana, from the Controlled Substances Act. And then, of course, just to do the real quick recap on federal law, you have two types of cannabis legally. Federally. And so that is marijuana, which is defined as all cannabis containing more than 0.3% THC, and then industrial hemp, which is the other 112 cannabinoids, or up to 0.3% THC. And then, of course, THC, you mean Delta 9 THC and not just total THC. However, that being the case, they are having a discussion about how to drop the rest of cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act. And I hope they do this 5-point plan that I have. And point number one is you expand the defunding of the Department of Justice to, currently it's all medical states. So the Department of Justice is effectively neutered when it comes to the federal marijuana laws for medical states. And in the budget, they have expanded that. I think that's the Blumenauer-McClintock amendment that expands it to just say you're defunded from enforcing the federal marijuana law in contravention of a state law. So now the entire, I guess, the entire drug war when it comes to marijuana will be defunded or stopped and effectively neutered in all the states that have allowed for adult use, which means that it's a lot more safe to actually be in Washington State or Colorado, or after the first of the year in Illinois. After that, number two, you pass the Safe Banking Act, and that Safe Banking Act opens up financial services to the cannabis industry that allows them to access these capital markets a little bit more. They can't go to actual market, and by that I mean the stock market, just yet. That will require a full descheduling, but having bank accounts and being able to have certain, maybe some financial services when it comes to loans, perhaps, but a bank account would be great. So at least it's not a cash only industry anymore.
Well,
What's that?
Does that also, will this also include, say, like the 280E issue or the
280E issue is going to be stickier because that is in the tax law, IRC 280E, and that doesn't say marijuana or cannabis. It just says Schedule 1. So you're not going to change 280E. You're going to have to deschedule. So dispensaries are still going to have to pay the double tax that comes from not being able to deduct the cost of trafficking in their business, and that sucks. But if you have bank accounts and also you have federal protection regarding the defunding of the Department of Justice from shutting you down, that allows the industry to mature so that the supply lines can be there for going from seed to sale, and the distribution can be established and developed, especially out east and in the Midwest. And that can take a little bit of time. And during that time, we can use the Controlled Substances Act and its prohibition almost as like a tariff, like a very strange tariff, in the sense that we have locked out all people that want to import cannabis, like Canada or Colombia or any other low-cost producer, until the systems are in place in our states to be able to have our own industry. And then you can drop it from the Controlled Substances Act, and everybody will be, cool, hip, and groovy, I guess.
So either it gets dropped or rescheduled. Say if it was scheduled to 2 or 3, that would eliminate a lot of issues for the tax issues, correct?
No. I think the way that IRC 280E is written is that it's if you're trafficking in a Schedule 1 or 2 substance. So you would have to drop it to a Schedule 3. Still doesn't make any sense why it's in a schedule whatsoever. It's not a drug, it's a plant.
Right on. Yeah, so Snyder keeps asking about Congress, but they're essentially just debating the whole situation right now about the whole
Yes,
That's
they're debating the merits. They may also be discussing the substantive bills that are currently in and before them. Some of those substantive bills we've discussed, a lot of them have been discussed on this show. Primarily, we're talking about, it used to be Section 538 of the budget. I'm not sure what it'll be this year, but that's the defunding of the Department of Justice, and that has to be passed every year because that's how appropriations work. But also, then there's the Safe Banking Act, which would speak to the regulators and give more teeth to the FinCEN guidance that Treasury gave, so the banks can start lending and start allowing accounts for these legitimate cannabis businesses.
Man, I really hope something happens. I mean, the more money flows into this, the more shit's going to happen momentum-wise.
Yeah, but I mean, think about it practically speaking. I mean, if you just suddenly drop it, you have a vacuum, and who's going to fill that vacuum? So if you slow walk it where it's like, all right, well, now you can't enforce those laws. Great. There's no money to enforce the laws. The banks are going to be a little bit more willing to lend. The states are going to be a little bit more willing to liberalize. And then what if you say, all right, not only can you not enforce it, but it's also okay to bank it? Same thing. It just picks up a little bit more steam. And these things do take time. I mean, how long did it take for Washington State to mature from medical marijuana through its adult use?
Well, it was an amazing transition that, I mean, unfortunately, from a, I guess, political perspective, it was kind of interesting and neat to watch happen. But from a citizen's perspective, it was a horrible accident. But, I mean, you know, the medical side of things, the infrastructure was there for a good 15 years beforehand. So then when they created their recreational infrastructure, it slowly started melding together. And what happened was the recreational people saw the loopholes, saw the kinks that they were losing on, and they created the SB 5052, another bill that came out, I believe, 2 years following the original legalization. And that was the nail in the medical's coffin. The Patients Care Act is what they called it. And it killed.
Because in law, all bills are named ironically or in a way that creates an acronym that spells a word, like the Safe Banking Act.
Yeah, it's just an unfortunate way it happened, you know. But yeah, the transition though, it was pretty much, I mean, because we already had infrastructure when it came to the culture and people doing business in the medical side of things, that part was easy enough. And I mean, we still have moratoriums. There's still people with reefer madness. There's still people who don't think that I can function as an adult.
Speaking of the wealth effect, U.S. marijuana sales doubling to 22 billion by 2022. I'm assuming that's baking into the cake some of the Illinois legalization, but then also maybe it's assuming, who knows, out east, if they get New York or New Jersey gets on board as well. And then it's always looked at the prism of these guys. Here's some of the big players. Curaleaf, they make, I think that's Gold Leaf, Curaleafs. Cresco Labs, they're big in Illinois. MedMen, I don't think is as big in Illinois. Harvest Health, Anthus, or maybe Anthus is Gold Leaf. I'm not sure about that. But yeah, so you're talking about an industry that's about a double again. And you were just talking about how it took 15 years for your medical industry and the supply chain issues that it had to develop and to mature before they could flip that switch into full adult use. And so you're going to see something similar. And that supply chain that you're building, that will, I think that's why you're going to see controlled one THC cannabis for the next 3 to 5 years as you defund and take the teeth out of the law so that it's really just a paper tiger there. But it being a paper tiger, it's acting as protectionistly so that all of a sudden, when it's legal, you don't have all this cheap cannabis coming up from Colombia. And I don't know about Canadian producers. They have to grow it all indoor. It could be tough.
Well, now hopefully Abbey can help clarify this. But like with MadMen and that list of companies that you could now there were stocks, right? That was IPOs.
Oh no, those aren't IPOs. Again, remember, I'm not just a marijuana lawyer and bank lawyer. I'm also a stockbroker. And so back in '08, I got my Series 7 license on like October 25th or something. It's like whenever the market just really sold off and they were going to do the bailout for the banks. It was a terrible time to become a stockbroker. But the way that these suckers are traded is that they aren't registered with the SEC to the same extent that publicly traded ones are. They're what they call OTC, the pink sheets, over the counter. That would be like your Wolf of Wall Street kind of stocks. They are notoriously illiquid in the sense that, a very liquid stock would be Apple, blue chip stock in the S&P 500, or like we don't have to talk about indexes. So that is a stock that you can buy and you can sell really, really quickly. And it's hard to get in a position that you can't get out of.
Yeah, but there's no
how big they are and how liquid they are. But with these small stocks that are traded over the counter, I don't know what the market is, and it can be very difficult to get in or out. But also, some of them try to get listed on the stock exchange by going to Canada and filing in Canada. But then they have to be limited, like Acreage Holdings, for example. They have to be limited to only being a Canadian operator, which, it still kind of sucks. But those IPOs will be the story of whatever year they're allowed to be. I don't know, 2024, something like that. When you can actually take them to market because they've dropped THC cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act.
Well, no, that's what I'm curious about, because I thought like the ones, if there's any available stock, it was either a Canadian or Israeli company. There are no American companies that you can purchase stock from, right?
Like I said, you can get them over the counter. So like that was Cresco right there, or MedMen, and they had tickers. And so you can buy them. They're just not on the stock exchange, and so they're on the pink sheets. They're penny stocks, for lack of a better description. I mean, you can go ahead and buy them. I just don't know how. First off, they're going to be really, really volatile, and second, I don't know how well you could exit or enter the position.
Oh, okay. So it's more like an agreement with you and that company. Hi, Abby.
Hey.
I'm
Abby,
here.
thank you for coming on the show, and that's why you guys all stuck around. Abby is a cannabis lawyer in Colorado, and I don't mean to introduce you any more than that. Why don't you introduce yourself to everybody on the podcast?
Yeah, of course. And sorry, my computer's having issues. I'm on my phone, but hopefully this works. It's got a video at least.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm a cannabis attorney in Colorado, Denver. Do a lot of criminal defense. There's still a lot of criminal cases for marijuana here. It's not totally legal, but also do a lot on the business side. I've had super interesting cases dealing with public consumption issues, bud tenders being charged.
What are the bud tenders getting charged with?
Yeah, in Colorado, it was last year. Bud tenders were charged with what they called looping at recreational dispensaries. So you're allowed to buy 1 ounce at a time. And some
they got that type of limitation here. So it's a scam called looping. Fill us in on that.
Yeah, that's what the police dubbed it, looping. So one person would come in, they'd buy 1 ounce, they'd go to their car, wherever, come back 15 minutes later, buy another ounce. So in retail sales, they couldn't keep track of the customers for privacy issues. So bud tenders didn't have a way to know who was coming back if they were having a really busy day, except for just recognizing that person's face. And so the police charged the bud tenders as being complicit with these people who were coming in and buying more than they were allowed to possess. So they'd buy 1 ounce and then they'd assume that they'd be possessing more than 1 ounce because they'd have it in their car or their home or somewhere. So it was kind of an out there theory, complicity, but six to 9 bud tenders got charged. They got charged with felony.
So it's a crime. That was my next question. Like, all right, So it's legal, but it's not legal. And what was the crime that they charged them with?
Charged them with possession of marijuana, distribution of marijuana over 4 ounces. So it was a felony.
Holy crap. Hey, MIggy, is this a similar thing that you have in Washington State?
So in Washington, I mean, obviously the diversion argument that everybody bitches about, we didn't have anything like that, no crackdowns. And Abby, correct me if I'm wrong, that was Sugar Leaf? That was the...
It was called Sweet Leaf.
Sweet Leaf.
That was the only dispensary that this happened to. So it was an outlier. But yeah, I think they used it to make an example. Actually, the owners eventually got charged.
Yeah.
And they're spending a year in prison right now.
For their supposed diversion bullshit, which
Yeah.
I mean, did they take that brunt because of their bud tenders being charged? Were they just like, no, give me the punishment, or was that just kind of like, okay, we see you as the like a RICO charge. You're the one in charge. You're the one running the show. So,
yeah, they actually, it was a Denver district attorney case, and then they threatened to charge the owners federally.
Federally?
Yeah, this was the first time this had happened, that they were going to charge him with distribution of marijuana, and so none of the constitutional protections from the Colorado Constitution, they'd argue, would apply.
See, that's something like we were just going over the news summary, and today they're having a thing on Capitol Hill about the congressional hearing for descheduling. And that was one of the things that we were discussing, was a trajectory toward a Controlled Substances Act without the cannabis plant in it. And one of the things that I think they need to happen, and this would speak to that exactly, if they defunded and they passed the Blumenauer-McClintock amendment that defunds the Department of Justice from enforcing the federal marijuana laws against any state that has state law compliant marijuana, would that then be something that they could no longer do?
Yeah, I think so. And I think we need that. I mean, they had the Cole memo and then they took it back.
Yeah, but they also have case law for when they try to prosecute medical marijuana. It's the McIntosh case from the Ninth Circuit back in 2016. And I think it was the one that's in Oakland with Steve D'Angelo. He was one of the defendants in it. And they had tens of thousands of plants, but there was no money to prosecute that litigation because of the defunding.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we need. And I thought that's where we were at in Colorado. But then we had the U.S. attorney come out and he did this radio blitz basically right before he stepped down and a new U.S. attorney took over, just saying that he's not going to let that happen in Colorado's regulated industry, that they needed to make an example of these people who aren't following the laws and the regulations. But eventually they were never charged or indicted federally. They were just threatened with it.
Yeah, but that's still that bullying tactic.
Yeah.
Where they're just threatening. And I mean, like they've done this before where they try to make an example. Have you ever heard of Lance Glore?
Yeah, I believe so. You want to refresh me?
Lance was a medical caregiver in Washington State. At the time when it was medical, he owned, I believe, like 4 dispensaries and a garden. And Washington State couldn't put a case against him. So one agency collected evidence by getting a prescription and buying a normal purchase across the store, and then took that evidence and handed it over to the DEA, who had to give it a federal, they had to charge him because the state couldn't fucking put a case against him. You know, this guy's only crime is to be a flashy kind of young guy. That was his deal. You know, he
make an example out of these flashy young guys.
I swear, out of successful business people, and that's the other thing about the marijuana stigma is, what do you mean you can't make a profit? I mean, you can make a profit off of Viagra pills, but you can't make a profit off of that
IRC 280E. I can't believe that. What do you mean I can't deduct the cost of my employees, my rent, my everything else that all these other businesses get to?
It is crazy. So with Sweet Leaf, didn't Abbey, weren't they trying to also kind of put some shade on them, talking about how perhaps they were cartel involved?
I didn't hear a lot of that, but they were. There was something about who they were invested in by.
Oh.
It was different than the other 4 big companies in Colorado. I'm not sure about the cartel connection, but it was just a shame because these bud tenders, they're working like, $12 an hour. They're basically cashiers. And they're trusting.
They're cashiers, but they have they have a knowledge of the flowers.
They definitely do, but they're not in charge of the business policies. They're just following orders from the owners, and the owners are taking it from the state. But what was crazy is that the state regulation said that you can only purchase an ounce in a single transaction. So that would,
Ours say that too. And so like
yeah.
this looping thing, like if there's cops watching our program, just taking notes, they're going to be like, oh, looping. I like this.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure who watched your program.
No, just cops, just cops.
Okay. But all these bud tenders got charged in 2017. Well, January 1st, 2018, they changed the definition to clarify that a single sales transaction means one per day. So you'd think that before that, it wouldn't mean that.
Yeah.
It's been clarified. So it was a murky case.
Well, how do you enforce that when you have multiple shops around you? What if I go get 1 ounce for one shop and go get? I mean, it's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, you can. And I mean, we have a street called Broadway in Denver. You could walk to shop and buy an ounce here and an ounce there, and you wouldn't be able to enforce it. Yeah.
And an ounce is kind of a bullshit limit. I mean, I've been to parties where a half a pound, people bring a half a pound for the party.
Right.
Well, it's kind of like bringing a handle of liquor, except the handle of liquor can kill you.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there's no limit on the liquor that you buy or the kegs that you buy.
So now you can give us an update as to like what is new in the marijuana, scene in Colorado.
Yeah. So there's 3 new things that I can really think of that have been going on that have been signed into law at the end of May. One is allowing publicly traded corporations or allowing out-of-state money to come in and to invest in Colorado, which is something that's happened in California and other states, and it's just been limited in Colorado. And so
like, did you guys actually, when you created your statutory rubric, did you exclude outside ownership? Is that why? Like, if I wanted to have a license in Colorado, I had to live in Colorado?
I think that's how it worked. I'm not totally, I do think that that's how it worked. And you had to go through the application process. I think it was something like if you had so much ownership in the company, you had to be in Colorado. And so it really limited investment for the bigger companies, but also, for the smaller companies for allowing them to grow. So it's going to be able to add some capital to Colorado that hasn't been able to be there in the past. I think it did limit any people living out of state.
So what are the couple of the other hot items?
Yeah, the other hot item is social consumption lounges that they're going to allow, places where people can go to consume marijuana, which hasn't
Oh my God, shocking.
Yeah, right? All these visitors, and where are they supposed to consume, come.
And like they go to the hotel and it says no smoking.
Yeah, you're not allowed to consume in the hotel.
You're not allowed to consume by Colorado's hotels?
No. I mean, I'm sure there's some that might allow it, but most of them don't.
It's actually written in Seattle's law where it's discretionary up for the hotels.
Okay. Well, it can violate the Clean Indoor Air Act.
Yeah, we have a similar one in Illinois, and they kind of wrote a little exception to the dispensary section of the law because it's like smoke-free Illinois law or something. And if you allow on-site consumption where you buy it, so at the dispensary, you can make the rule so it'll be an exception to the Smoke-Free Illinois Act.
Yeah, I think now this creates an exception for the Indoor Air Act, which is good. I had a case, we went to trial on public consumption violation of the Clean Indoor Air Act for the International Church of Cannabis. And they had a 420 event in 2017. They had made it a private event, which is how you structured it previously. But some undercover officers were able to get in. And
they're everywhere.
Yeah. But now this will create a framework. Jurisdictions can opt in or choose not to participate. And that can certainly happen because many counties in Colorado and towns have opted out of having marijuana establishments. But now this will create a framework. It'll start, I think, January 1st, 2020, where they can start applying for these licenses and allow people to.
You guys are going to monetize it a little bit more for the state. And we don't know what the rules are right now. I spoke to Jeff Cox earlier today. He's the guy in Springfield, the head of medicinal plants. And so I don't know what it's going to turn out to, but you can monetize and charge an additional fee in Colorado coming up for this year for public consumption. That might be a new thing in Illinois one day.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the other big thing is delivery services, which they're going to allow. And same thing, they can charge a fee for that. And it's just going to, I think it's just connected with medical establishments, retail establishments, but in the future, they might be able to make some more third-party businesses that do delivery, kind of like in California.
Do you guys have BYOB clubs? Any of you?
Well,
Not
I know
right
in
now.
Illinois we don't because it's
Yeah.
still totally illegal and it's
Oh, no,
not
even
it's
for alcohol.
criminalized. So like you can have a club and try to skate under the thing, you know, medical patients only, or 3/8 of an ounce is all I have, and that's just a civil fine.
Yeah, if you're a private club and you can come in and bring your own, but those are kind of under the radar. And
Right.
in Denver, they do have a social consumption law that allows for it, but it hasn't been implemented very well because of how heavily they've restricted it and the prohibitions they put about where it can be, how far it can be from certain things. And so it hasn't really fleshed out to be anything. And so hopefully this statewide attempt will be better.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's see here. The other stuff that they don't have in Illinois are those things with the delivery and the consumption they have built in. But can you tell us about like any amendments or like how is the Colorado law? First off, I'd like to know if you guys call it marijuana or cannabis legislatively, and second, how is it opening up and changing? Because that's one of the things that we talk about on here a lot is how our marijuana laws, if nothing else, are a civics lesson in real time.
Mm-hmm. We usually call it marijuana, although when we're in court, we call it cannabis because unless the prosecutor can prove that it's above 0.3% THC.
Uh-oh.
So they have
Debbie.
What's that?
All right. Let's see. Can you hear us now?
Yeah.
I tell you, this is the hard part with having a live show on YouTube. It's dependent upon Wi-Fi connectivity.
I think the hamsters got tired.
All right, the hamsters that run the internet.
Okay.
All right.
They're just kind of getting laggy there.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm
All right, try it again. Try it again. Tell us about the updates. Now, is it as a term of art? Is it like the marijuana laws in Colorado? Because in Illinois, we call it cannabis.
Yeah, they call it marijuana because we have the Marijuana Enforcement Division, and that's what's regulating, 0.3% THC.
The plant, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so even you guys have built in that level of stigma still, even though you have legalization.
Yeah, and so that's a constant fight when we have criminal marijuana cases I'm defending in court, is educating the court about what is cannabis versus marijuana versus industrial hemp. That if the prosecutor, and this is what I was trying to say when it cut out, but that the prosecutors need to affirmatively prove that cannabis is 0.3% THC or more to prove
that
that
is huge, and that is awesome in the sense that that's coming up now in Illinois because the firm that I'm at is as cannabis centric as you can get in the state. But that, of course, means that you have a great criminal lawyer in the firm as well. And the issue of being stopped as you are doing a shipment of high quality hemp flower through the state is coming up because you drive through some rural areas in the state, hemp flower, cannabis flower. They look the same, they smell the same, the dogs alert the same. And I didn't know that there was a specific burden of proof in Colorado that the police must prove the chemical consistency over and above that 0.3% threshold. That is awesome.
Well, it's it's what's written in the Constitution. The definition of marijuana does not include industrial hemp. And then we have industrial hemp is defined, and it was defined clearly in the Constitution as from the cannabis sativa plant, less than 0.3% THC. They just changed that through an Amendment X, which was the last legislative, the elections, I think they were last year. They changed it now that the definition for industrial hemp mirrors the federal definition, which
Mm.
is the same, and we fought that a little bit. We wanted it to just be what it is, what had been voted on by the people, what was in the Constitution, because now the legislator can change it more frequently or easily. But
Hey, MIggy, is that the same kind of way that it works in Washington State? When you guys do ballot initiatives, because you're going to have to inform me and the rest of the other 30 some states that don't do them, you put marijuana in the Constitution?
No, it's not in our Constitution. Our Constitution is more of a libertarian type statement. There's no specific like amendments towards alcohol, or not that I know of.
But how do you do these ballot initiatives? So like in Colorado, when you do a ballot initiative, does that impact the Constitution?
Abbey?
Abbey? Yeah.
Oh, I think we voted for a constitutional amendment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I'm from Iowa. I went to University of Iowa Law School. So I came out here in.
So you're catching up.
Yeah, I've been here since 2015, but I wasn't here for when the initiative was passed. But yeah, it was voting for an amendment to the Constitution to legalize recreational marijuana.
Fascinating. No, they don't have that, but that's interesting. And then of course it's the labyrinth, or what do they call it? The laboratory of democracy. So you have all these different states that have different things that they can do. I mean, like here in Illinois, you have to do it legislatively. You're not allowed to amend the Constitution of the state of Illinois through a ballot initiative, like it sounds like you're able to do in Colorado to legalize it. But then it also sounds like in MIggy's Washington State, the Constitution is just a libertarian that every now and then you guys, how do you handle the ballot initiatives then? What does that change?
Well, that's what I was telling you before. For us here, we're trying to get homegrown. The one thing our law didn't implement was homegrown. The legislator keeps telling us, well, it's not illegal to not homegrow, but yet it's not in the books. So it's still illegal. So what we've been trying to do, we have to, just like everywhere else, kind of like we were talking before, we have to get amendments signed through the House and the Senate, and then when they merge as one, then that'll effectively be a law for us, or a rule, but it's not an amendment to the Constitution. I was just looking at the Constitution, our Constitution. I did a PDF search for cannabis or marijuana, and nothing popped up. Again, it's all like your right as an individual and your safe space and all that,
I don't think Illinois has safe space. Maybe like justice and equality and freedom with measure toward, universal truth or something.
Yeah. And peace to all.
Yeah, I think it's all about privacy rights too, and being able to decide what you want to do with your own space, your own body that doesn't affect anyone else. Yeah,
my body, my choice.
Right.
Yeah, not in Illinois. In Illinois, it's more about like social equity. We are going to improve everything through using this thing that is currently a crime.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's actually social. It's gonna be great for like your state is setting a bar for the treatment of. We're just getting around to it. We've had legalization for 7 years, recreational, and we're just getting around to the social equity part. So,
well, is that a part in Colorado law or in Washington state law? Because I just did a video on the social equity aspect of Illinois.
It's not.
How about you guys in Colorado?
It's not in Colorado, but they are talking about making it part of it, and it's
kind of a scam. Like, well, it's not. I mean, like, it's noble, and by kind of, it's here's what it is in Illinois. You can be one of three things. First, you can have 51% ownership and control by an Illinois resident or Illinois residents. It's a company that have lived for the past 5 of 10 years in a poor area. And like this poor area will be like, you find the poverty levels that are kept on the national level, and you look for like, 20% of poverty levels, and you see where these areas are. Or two, you have 51% ownership and control, and you are one of the people who are eligible for the expungible offenses or a member of their family, which is millions of people, because there's 800,000 people that are eligible for these expungible offenses of marijuana possession as it's provided in the law. And then anybody who's related to one of these people that got arrested. So, right there, you can just at least double the number of people that are out there. Or three, it is a lawful adult use business that has at least 10 full-time employees that fit number 1 or number 2. So basically, they didn't really want to get some type of strange equal protection, affirmative action, constitutional change or challenge to the law where they're saying like, hey, you're doing this clearly based on race. Instead, they said, no, we'll look at the poor neighborhoods. And then we'll also look at the people that have been arrested for cannabis, which if you look at the data, that basically means that you're probably not me.
Well, aren't you also the veteran aspect as well?
The veteran aspect is there, but the points for veterans are much smaller.
Ah.
Do you anticipate challenges to that? Maybe from some of your...
No, I don't. I anticipate. That's why there's justice to it, and it's a good thing to try to rehabilitate the neighborhoods that you intentionally blighted through this law for the past 80 years. That's entirely noble, and I'm glad that they're doing it. But then you see what they've done is the first 2 required ownership and control, and the third one just required a number of employees. So they're just going to use the third door and try to run a bigger business because then they can maintain ownership and control, but they're also diversity and social equity positive.
Mm-hmm. And that includes the you guys are funding, right? The state is helping subsidize funding, whatnot.
You need to be a qualified social equity applicant. And so a qualified social equity applicant would be a social equity applicant that has been awarded a conditional adult use dispensary license or a cultivation license. And there's none of the cultivation licenses that are currently open. Maybe the rules will change that. I don't know. But with the dispensary licenses, sure. So the way that you could structure your application is if you're a social equity applicant, is in such a way that upon your awarding of that license, you have 6 months in which to provide to the state your address. So you could then get the license, prove the loan, do the build out, and open.
That'd be pretty nice. And you guys expect to go in business next year, right? January 1st?
The large producers getting to go into business on January 1st. So everybody who's operating now will be operating through 2020. New players will start appearing probably in 2021.
Are you guys still prosecuting for cannabis?
Oh yeah.
Because
that's one of the things that I was jokingly having a conversation with a possible client about. Like, hey, tell you what I'm going to do. Oh shit, I'm not even sure if I can. I would have to go illegally buy weed, so not go to my medical marijuana dispensary, buy some shitty weed, and then like call the police on myself. Like, make sure that the amount that I have is the expungible offense amount, and like call the police and be like, I got it, man, come get me, just so I can get arrested so that I would qualify as a social equity applicant.
Why not?
Because it's disingenuous. That's why not. I'm busy,
Yeah, and hopefully the police aren't making it a priority anymore.
Well, no, that's what I said. I'd have to literally walk into the police station with like an ounce or something. Be like, I bought this on the street, man. Arrest me. Come on, I'm trying to get a loan.
Oh shit. So are you involved, Abby, with the mushroom craze as well now?
I'm not really. I've been following it though, that it's decriminalized in Denver. I've had cases though. They're still prosecuting it in other counties.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Grows or manufacturing.
Because Colorado is kind of conservative, right? I mean, like Denver is a fairly liberal place, but if you get outside of that, isn't it pretty buttoned down?
It is, yeah, and I practice all over the state. I had been a public defender first before moving into this cannabis firm, and I worked in Jefferson County, Colorado, which is more conservative, more law and order, I guess, and a few other jurisdictions like Colorado Springs. They're not as much like Denver. Yeah.
Well, you got a base. That's a base town too, though, military town.
Yep. Yep. Mm-hmm.
But haven't the numbers shown that you guys are better off for it by now?
That we're what?
That your cities are better off for it as far as reduced crime rates, as because being cannabis is legal, and that's less crime. I mean, isn't there some sort of statistics that these people can wake up to that you think?
For mushrooms?
No, for cannabis. I'm sorry.
For cannabis. Yeah. For I think everyone's gotten on board with cannabis for the most part.
Okay.
But we do, a lot of my cases are cultivation of marijuana. If you have over your doctor's recommendation, if your doctor's recommendation is expired, and certain counties prosecute that differently than others.
Interesting. So like the home grow is going to be, and then Washington State doesn't have it, and Miggy's just perplexed about that. But Illinois is going to allow home grow in 5 plants for medical patients, and some of the there's some exceptions to the law, like, you know, and I see some businesses that are trying to form as being consultants, because like these patients, they don't know how to grow. It could literally be the first time that you're ever trying to grow cannabis, and so. Can you have a consultant as your designated agent to come in and like say, all right, here's how you do the rig. Here's some low stress training. You know, here's water at this, check the pH, those types of things. And I read the law and I'm like, you know, we're gonna have to see what the rules say, but it says that it has to be the person who lives at the residence or their designated agents, such as when they're out of town. So, hey, man, I'm going out of town for the week. I got to go to the pool and, you know, with the kids. You want to watch my plants?
Really? So you don't
Yeah. How do they do it in Colorado?
Them? Well, in Colorado, you can have a designated caregiver. And so they can grow the plants in their residence, but they changed the law January 1st here also, where you can only have 12 plants in your residence.
12 plants? You can only have 5.
Yeah. Well, before you could have up to your doctor's recommendation, which was sometimes 99.
99 plants.
Yeah. And so
Miggy, they don't allow any type of home grow cultivation at all in Washington State anymore?
So for medical, there is. If you're a medical patient, first off, you have to be medical script. And then you're allowed, I believe, 5 plants. But if you want to do more than that, you have to register into the state's directory for 15 plants. And you know, nobody wants to be on the hit list. The biggest thing as a citizen, an average consumer, I can't home grow. There are no seeds for sale out here. There are no clones for sale. You know, plenty of weed, but no opportunities for your average day Joe type
Is
person.
that how it is in Colorado? Is Colorado only medical home grow or only medical giver home grow?
No, you can grow, every person can grow 6 plants, 3 veg, 3 non-veg, and then you can have that up to 12 in your home. So if there's 2 residents in your home, you can have 6 veg, 6 non-veg. If you had a medical
that's kind of like how a lot of your prosecutions in the marijuana space in Colorado are going now. I mean, I read a newsletter that there was this huge operation of home grow exporting.
Yep. Yeah, they used to allow a lot more. Like I was saying, 99 plants, just based on what your doctor's recommendation was, and if it was up to date, that's what you could have. But now they're trying to cut back more. Officers making sure people are up to date on their doctor's recommendation. And so I think because it was kind of so much was allowed before and that they're scaling back, not everyone's informed totally about what the law is and about what they can have in their home. And so they have officers coming in, and then sometimes they get.
Do they just have like adult use home grow, or is it all medical home grow?
You can have recreational home grow or medical. So you can have doctor's recommendation for more, or every person can have 6. I did have an interesting case I wanted to talk about, because you can have, it can be outside, but only if it's in an enclosed locked space, or it has to be inside. And so I've had cases in Denver, you know, just people in their 40s, you know, late 40s. They've got mansions, beautiful neighborhoods in Denver. They have a tomato garden, and they've got 4 plants back there. And we had a case where the officers came in, they searched, they cut down the plants, they weighed them wet, said they weighed 19 pounds.
Oh my God.
And so the woman was arrested, charged with a felony for intent with possession to distribute, because 19 pounds is more than a regular person would use to consume. And for cultivation, because it wasn't legal because it wasn't in an enclosed locked space, even though it was in her gate that was about 6 feet high, and the gate was locked because it wasn't enclosed overhead. She was charged. And then what they do in Denver, they used to do, I haven't seen it much more, but they condemn the house as a public nuisance.
Oh shit.
Yeah, for 4 plants.
Wow.
So they put a nuisance sign on their front door. They did this to this couple on trick or treat night. So
Oh my
everyone
God.
in their neighborhood.
Public shaming. You see, that's what we have.
Yeah.
There you go. That's that morality that I'm used to seeing.
Yeah. And then they have to, enter, their house has to be on probation, basically.
But they don't confiscate the house. They just condemn it and say it's a nuisance.
Well, we tried to fight it. And if they have probable cause to say that it's a nuisance, then they can evict the couple from their home until you go to basically trial.
Oh my God.
Kick you out of your own home, like that you own, that it's not a rental, it's your name's on the title, and kick you out of your own home for how long?
Until you have the trial. So it could be a couple weeks. We settled before that. The couple didn't want to see that happen.
Oh my God.
But none of these cases have really been tested much in Denver, this Denver nuisance law, because it's so extreme. I mean, we were in front of the judge. The judge described it as draconian.
Wow.
That's nice to have, though. I mean, like, it's nice to have that kind of sympathy from the bench, but at the same time, it sucks that that's even
law. Yeah. So
wow, so many
I've
questions.
seen less and less of it, but because people have been fighting it, but it's still a mechanism that's in place for them to be able to use.
See, and that's for recreational use, right, Abby?
What's that?
No, that was for recreational use for that couple, right?
Yeah. But if she would have had it in a greenhouse, it would have been legal. Mm-hmm.
But see, my thing is, here in Washington, we're trying to get the home grow option, at least put it on the books. And you have a lot of criteria for the home grow option, but for us, we're just trying to tell. Our biggest argument is it's going to be complaint driven. Just like now, people are home growing. Things are going to be complaint driven. Is that how it's going on with you? Like, do they have an asshole neighbor that decide, like, hey, those plants are not tomato plants? I'm calling you in. Wow.
Yeah, I think that's how it works. Mm-hmm.
Like,
but you never know
the PTA, like that bitch Susie over there.
Yeah.
Or their home backs up to an alley, and they stand on the bed of a truck to peek over the alley, over the fence.
Neighbors are terrible people.
Yeah, you can't really. You can't know who's all around you all the time. Too.
Now, for your guys' limitation though, from that 99, because I know you guys, it was crazy. Like some people were like 400 plants, but at the same token, you have patients fighting this rule because some real sick people need 100 plants. Like they are just pure extract people, pure pico, which requires a lot. For a pound, for an ounce of oil, you need a pound, let's say. So, there are people who need 99 plants. What's being done about that?
Yeah. So I think if your town allows it, you can have up to 24 in your residence, which was the new change. Doctors can recommend more. I think doctors have started just to recommend less, but there are those patients out there who totally need salves or lotions or edibles to treat serious medical conditions, and this medicine changes their lives.
Yeah.
And so that is difficult for them, that they're limited to that amount. And they have fought. I mean, I think there are challenges to that limitation for the 24.
It's amazing. I think it's okay.
Oh, I was just going to say, but it is written into that law, that limit on the 12 and the limit on the 24, that the first if you have a doctor's recommendation for more, the first offense is a petty offense. And then the second, I think, is a misdemeanor fine. And so it's written in to try to educate people about the law, but I haven't necessarily seen it played out that way. Because if your doctor's rec is expired by even a day, then that protection doesn't apply.
Sure. It's all of a sudden now you're not sick anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we argue your debilitating medical condition never expires. unless it's been proven to expire. Mm-hmm.
Oh man, it's just unfortunate. I think we've gotten to where we're at with legalization because of sick people, but now because of recreational, sick people are tired of showing up to the Capitol or whatnot. It's not an option for a lot of these guys.
Yeah, and they really spearheaded this fight in Colorado, and now it's it's a lot about recreational and about the regulations that come out from that and about the business structures. And I do think that they get tired of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the business is pretty cool.
The business is cool.
Well, like you're saying, Tom, is watching this whole process is a slow, painful, educational on our system. If I didn't have to try and get this homegrown, and if I didn't have no understanding of the Senate, the House. I thought one bill goes through, we're good to go. But
only in Nebraska.
Yeah. Unilateral, right? Or
it's the Lance Armstrong of the state governments. It's got one nut.
So do you think you're close in Washington?
No. Well, so now it's hanging up second year in a row in a committee. And the irony is it's a Democratic-led committee, which you would think they'd be all about the social justice and reform and getting it all correct. But each time there's just somebody who they're afraid they use either the federal laws against it. Like, as soon as we legalize homegrown, they're going to crack down on us. But 7 years deep into this industry, it's got its infrastructure. People are paying their bills and living right. I don't think the zombie apocalypse is going to happen as soon as I get a right to do something. As a matter of fact, it'll benefit the state because now you got a new product of freaking tax, clones and seeds.
Then right there, you're preaching to Illinois' choir because they're a broke state. They're a state that had outflows of people year after year, the shittiest roads that I've ever seen. I just got back from Wisconsin a couple of weeks ago. You're driving in Wisconsin as normal, and then you get across the state line, and it's just like open holes and just burn out everything. It's like, back in Illinois.
Yeah, they need this. Illinois needs it. Iowa needs it.
Iowa is so far behind though, because Iowa, I reviewed their hemp law, and Iowa is almost as bad as Indiana. And I just don't think that they're going to make any change anytime soon because it's Iowa's culture to be very, very conservative.
Yeah, I think as long as there's a Republican governor, nothing will happen there. And who knows I think a Democratic governor would have to run on that for it to really get money.
As much as I want to say Democrat, Republican, it's just so ironic that Darth Vader's leading the legalization with McConnell.
Yeah, but he's such a shit. When it comes to hemp, he's your shit. But then as soon as you make the cleavage between, I'm glad that you like these other 112 cannabinoids. Have you heard about Delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol? Oh, that stuff's for hippies. No, sir. No, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, him and Obama both have grandfathers that were slave owners, so that's. I don't know if you heard that, guys. There's some dumb shit he said. Oh, there's some dumb shit he said. But hey, I do have to go. Break's ending for me. I gotta go back to work.
Hey, and I wanted to thank Abbey for coming on the show and for discussing the state of the art in Colorado's marijuana market. And come back on and give us a report in a few more months about where you guys are at.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you for having me. Thanks for working with my technical difficulties. And I'd love to come back on.
Should be easier next time.
Yeah, it should be.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
All right.